Wherever you feel comfortable.
I'll flank you.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Can we go a little closer? It's really nice.
Yeah,
There's no gap between, shoulders. I learned that trick. Yeah.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. We're here today to mark the Trans Day of Remembrance. I'm joined by MPs Blake and Lisa Marie, and also by Faye Johnston and Celeste Trianon. Today we mark the murder of more than 321 trans and gender diverse people around the world, including one Canadian over the last year. But we're also here to recognize the high levels of deaths by suicide in the trans and gender diverse community and the death of one trans Canadian in the last year. We're here because we're calling on leaders at all levels to take a strong stance against the rising tide of hate and violence directed against the trans community. We know that the most vulnerable in our society, some of the most vulnerable, are trans kids. And we've seen conservative premiers attacking children's rights, in particular trans kids' rights. And we all need to speak out strongly against that. As well as standing directly against the hate, 7 years ago, we passed Bill C-216, which put transgender and gender diverse rights into the Canadian Human Rights Code and into the hate crime section of the Criminal Code. But what we haven't done as a society is make those rights a reality. And so we put forward a white paper in June that has 29 recommendations, about how to make those rights a reality. And if we implement those rights, we will strengthen the trans community to stand in the face of this rising tide of hate and violence. So now I'm going to turn it over to Faye's on this side of me, sorry. Faye Johnston.
Thank you. Hello. My name is Faye Johnstone, and I'm the president of the Society of Queer Momentum, a 2SLGI+ advocacy organization based in Nova Scotia, and I launched the e-petition 4666, or as I like to call it, the Trans Equality Now petition. And we're very grateful to MP Randall Garrison for supporting this petition. My community, trans and gender diverse people, face immense equality and staggering incidents of discrimination in this country. I launched this petition because we, like all Canadians, deserve the freedom to be ourselves, to be safe in our communities, and treated with dignity. We deserve to live lives that aren't held back or negatively impacted by the systemic discrimination that unfortunately feels like it's resurgent today. And we need our federal government, the Government of Canada, to take action to address this contemporary rise in hate and to deliver true, fulsome equality for trans and gender diverse Canadians. Trans people are our neighbors, our colleagues, our friends, and our family members. We're educators, factory workers, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We contribute to the economy, to our culture, and to our communities. And we want what everybody wants. We want the freedom to be ourselves, to be safe in our communities, to be able to pay our bills and live fulfilling lives. But all across this country, we are held back. Not by any failing of our own, but because of long-standing stigma and discrimination. For decades now, we have been maligned and mistreated because we're different. In the past 20 years, we've come a long way on the human rights and equality of queer and trans people in this country. Our lives have indeed improved, and society's view of us has shifted, but discrimination and stigma still persist. Trans kids are still cast out of their homes. Trans people are still forced out of their workplaces. My community, who has so much to offer this world, so much to contribute to our economy and to our society, is still held back. In 2017, Canada passed Bill C-16, and we enshrined transgender rights in Canadian legislation. And it was met with immense hope and joy by trans and gender diverse people all across this country. But now, 6 years later, it feels like little has changed. Equality on paper has not translated into equality in practice. And now we are seeing rising hate that threatens the progress that we have made. And to me and many in my community, it feels like we're on the precipice of regression. Right now, trans people are under attack. There are far-right groups taking advantage of that stigma that's still in the air, and paired with the public's lack of familiarity with trans people, far-right groups are trying to sow division and fuel hatred. Why? Because they're scared of our diversity, scared of what we represent. Because we as a people directly challenge the misogynistic, homophobic, and transphobic gender norms that have held so many in our communities back. And second, because it's politically convenient. Because the groups pushing this hatred and stigma towards our community have a broader and deeply dangerous purpose. They are hoping to fuel anger, to sow division, to use trans people to break new ground in their fight against freedom, against rights, and against equality for all. What scares me right now is the politicians taking their cue from these far-right groups. Whether it's Premier Moe in Saskatchewan, whether it's Premier Higgs in New Brunswick, whether it's Pierre Poilievre, who is echoing explicitly anti-trans rhetoric that is simply repackaged homophobia from the 1970s with the word gender and trans swapped in where they used to say gay instead. These politicians are playing with fire. They're pitting Canadians against a tiny minority of transgender people. They're sowing division and hatred, and they're hoping to channel that anger into electoral success. Pierre Poilievre, the Conservative Party, and these conservative premiers should be ashamed of themselves because Canadians deserve better than hate and ignorance in our politics. But I know that Canadians are smarter than that. I know that we will see through this divisive and hateful strategy and that we'll come together across our diverse communities to choose love, compassion, and humanity over hate and discrimination. My community is scared, and I am truly terrified. Over the last year, I've received hundreds, if not thousands, of death threats and hateful messages for being myself and speaking out for my community. In March of this year, I had to have security guards with me 24/7 in front of my home and everywhere that I went because of the degree of hate sent my way. My community is made up of individuals who just want to live our lives, and this is still the reality we have to deal with. In June of this year, MP Randall Garrison's office published a white paper with 29 recommendations for the Government of Canada to truly advance trans equality. I urge Justin Trudeau and his cabinet to take up the roadmap that has been put in their laps and to show us, trans people and Canadians across this country, that partisan lines will not get in the way of addressing the inequalities and hatred that trans people face right now. For every Canadian watching this, I urge you to remember that trans people are your neighbors, your colleagues, your family members, and your friends. I urge you to recognize that inequality and discrimination hurt all of us. And I urge you to go to www.transequalitynow.ca or search for petition 4666 on the House of Commons petition website so you can add your name and show this government that we will not tolerate inaction amidst rising hate. Show this government that people of all communities, of all races, classes, and all genders want to see real leadership for trans equality. We deserve a better world for the next generation of trans kids, and we need this government to help us make that happen. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's amazing.
We're good.
Hi, everyone. My name is Celeste Trianon. I'm a trans feminine jurist and activist based in Montreal, and I'm the founder of the Trans Legal Collective, an organization I founded specifically to address the legal issues that trans people face in day-to-day life. Today is Transgender Day of Remembrance, or for short, Trans Day of Remembrance. It comes after Trans Awareness Week, a week dedicated to raising awareness about trans inequality and the various legal, social, and political issues that we face in our day-to-day lives. Trans Day of Remembrance was created in 1998 in order to commemorate the murder of Black trans woman Rita Hayster in Allston, Massachusetts, and Chanel Pickett in Watertown, Massachusetts. 2023 is the 25th time we're marking Trans Day of Remembrance all across the road. On this day, trans and gender diverse people all across Canada and all across the globe gather at vigils, ceremonies, and protests to remember the lives lost to murderous violence this year. In the past year, over 320 trans people were killed across the globe, including many here in Canada. 94% of victims of trans murders are trans women or trans feminine people. And trans people affected by racism make up more than 80% of the reported murders, a 15% increase year over year. These numbers are merely a small glimpse at what is the reality on the ground right now. Most cases worldwide continue to go unreported because These, because unfortunately, we're unable to track these deaths. When we talk about 320 people who have been murdered, this is but the tip of an iceberg. Many more trans people have died to murders, to violence, and to suicides in the past year alone. I'd like to now draw your attention to one particular issue that many people in the trans community are facing: trans healthcare. I'm sure all of you in this room and all of you watching recognize how important healthcare is to you. It is the thing that keeps us all alive, and the fact that we have universal healthcare all across Canada is a point of pride for many of us. It is a core Canadian value that we all strive to keep. This healthcare necessarily includes gender-affirming healthcare, which is a form of healthcare that trans people can greatly benefit from, which enables them to live their full lives, to be tax-paying members of society, enabling us to contribute our knowledge to creating a better Canada for future generations to come. Unfortunately, this is now being increasingly targeted. It is official Conservative Party policy to criminalize gender-affirming care for trans youth, life-saving and life-improving care, which makes sure that they are able to contribute as adults to making Canada a better place for all. Laws like these would be clearly unconstitutional. They would violate the right to life, to liberty, and security of the person, as well as equality rights, as enshrined by our Canadian Charter over 40 years ago. But more and more, we're seeing this: provincial Conservatives playing fast and loose with constitutionally protected rights. More and more times where Section 33, the notwithstanding clause, is being invoked specifically to gut the rights of trans and non-binary youth, as can be seen in Saskatchewan with Bill 137, the first time said clause has been used to target young people. We have no reason to expect they wouldn't do the same at the federal level, hence why my community is scared and terrified. We've yet to get a promise from Pierre Poilievre that a government led by him would not enact such cruel law that would result in the unnecessary suffering and unnecessary deaths of trans youth and adults. Even as Canadians should be concerned by the Conservative Party supporting such a dangerous and harmful policy, we need the current federal government to do more to address the barriers to gender-affirming healthcare. Like all other forms of healthcare, there are medical associations, there are groups who are creating standards behind this. In the case of gender-affirming healthcare, it's the Road Professional Association for Transgender Health Standards of Care, which has been updated just last year to reflect the newest evolving standards in making sure that trans people get the best healthcare possible. But in Canada, only 2 provinces and territories have anything close to the policy that has been enacted by medical professionals worldwide. It's Yukon, which has been introduced by a Liberal government with all-party support, and recently PEI with a Tory government. Other provinces, such as Nova Scotia and British Columbia, have been making improvements in other areas of gender-affirming care, such as, for example, further ensuring said healthcare and making sure that there's extra access and funding for these. Despite this progress, we continue to see long wait times for hormones, for puberty blockers, and surgeries. We see trans people waiting months, if not years, to access the healthcare they need. We're causing unnecessary suffering by making them wait for so long. And we need the federal government to play a leadership role in ensuring that trans Canadians, no matter where they live, no matter whether they're on this side of the border or the other one, have access to the evidence-based and medically necessary healthcare that they need when and where they need it. As you've heard today from my fellow colleagues and myself, anti-trans hate is on the rise. It's exacerbating the inequalities trans and non-binary Canadians face day to day. And if we want to counter this, if we want to counter anti-trans hate, we need to empower trans organizations. We need a stronger voice here in Ottawa. We need to make sure that trans people on the front line caring for fellow community members are able to be supported. For decades, trans people have come together to support our own community, often because no one else would. by supporting trans organizations, helping them scale up their services, and conduct more public education, we can address hate, address disinformation, and improve the everyday lives of trans and non-binary Canadians everywhere. In September, I brought people all across the country to counter-protest the hateful 1 Million March for Children movement. These marches in small communities and big cities were full of hateful messages and rhetoric that dehumanized us. But while they rallied for hate, we rallied for human rights. We came out to speak for trans young people, to defend for everyone the freedom to be themselves. We said down what I'm saying today, that there is no space for hate in our communities or in our country. I urge the Canadian government to listen to trans people, our families, and our allies. I urge them to help make sure that we, as a country, reject the divisive agenda of far-right groups and work towards a Canada where there is no space for hate. Trans kids in every corner of our country are scared. They need to know that the federal government has their backs. But right now, it doesn't feel like it. Therefore, I call on Justin Trudeau to deliver on a promise of trans equality as he promised back in 2015. Not just on paper, but in practice. The next generation of transgender young people deserve to grow up in a country that welcomes them, to grow up safe in their communities, and to grow into thriving adults who contribute to our economy, culture, and society. Thank you.
So I want to thank Faye and Celeste for their eloquent remarks this morning that help us center trans voices on this Trans Day of Remembrance. We know there's a rising tide of hate and violence, and we know what to do about it. We first need a clear stand from leaders at all levels in government against this rising tide of hate and violence, and then we need practical measures that will help to strengthen the trans community so that they can thrive as fully equal Canadians. So we're happy to take your questions at this point.
Yes, apologies if I missed this off the top. I was just typed out another press conference that was delayed. But do you think the government should bring forward a reference case with the notwithstanding clause used in Saskatchewan?
Well, I don't think we'll probably have to wait for the government to bring a reference case. I think we'll see people in the community marshalling their resources to bring cases forward. It's unfortunate that we'll have to waste resources from the community in defending rights that all other Canadians enjoy, but I am certain that this will happen.
And just a while back when Saskatchewan was first talking about invoking the notwithstanding clause, Minister Ian talked about this being a matter of life and death for trans youth, and said we're monitoring the situation. We still haven't seen much action from Ottawa here. Just what do you make of the response so far?
Well, I think there's an important point that was made by Minister Ian, and that is that when you see the hate and violence expressed online and in public, it has real consequences for the trans community. It results in violent incidents, and it results in a great deal of fear that causes trans people to withdraw from activities that the rest of us would normally enjoy because of those fears. So I think it's an important point, and it points to the need for action, the need for leadership from the federal government in standing against the hate, and the need for those practical actions that are in the white paper that will actually strengthen the community in responding to the hate and violence.
Has Minister Ian responded to what you put in the white paper?
She has said that when the petition closes, the government will provide a response. Of course, they're obligated to do that, but that's all she said at this point. And I have to say that the petition is off to a good start. In its first week, it gathered something over 3,000 signatures. I think it's over 4,000 now. And there's a campaign that's now going on among community groups, including labor groups, to try and encourage more and more people to let the federal government know that this is a priority, not just for trans Canadians, but for all Canadians who believe in equality. Any further questions?
I'll check online. If you have a question, please use the raise hand function now. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, levez la main.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone.